A warm dusk haze clung to the rooftops of Orist, the capital of Corona, like translucent silk. Outside the western gate, where the road bent toward wheat fields and heath, there was a crumbling shrine no taller than a child. Travellers often missed it, for bramble and blue-leaf ivy wove tight around the lintels, and the only sign of its importance was a single shard of glazed porcelain glinting in the stone niche. One had to stand at precisely the right angle for the setting sun to strike that shard and ignite its hidden glow, a glow rumoured to belong to what minstrels called the Porcelain Stag that carries a kingdom's source of fragile luck upon its antlers of light. Every Karanin child learned the legend by heart. It went like this. When the continent was still stitched with feuding fiefdoms, the river goddess Karan looked upon a brave but penniless tribe who named themselves after her. To protect them, she gathered moon water, spring frost, and the first pale flames of dawn, and shaped a stag the colour of fresh milk. The creature's eyes shone with calm rivers. Its hooves chimed on stone. Upon its antlers flickered a prism of perpetual dawn. A constellation of descending stars that could tilt fortune toward prosperity or ruin. As long as the Karanins honoured the stag's gift, the goddess promised, the kingdom would enjoy gentle rains, plentiful harvests, and peace more lasting than stone. Break a time, smudge its glaze, or harass its keeper, and the kingdom's fragile luck would shatter like ice on rock. Yet no mortal knew where the stag rested, or whether it was carved, conjured, or truly alive. The old shrine was but one of many clues. Some claimed the stag ran beneath the river itself, its porcelain legs never slipping on slick shale. Others swore it guarded the citadel's deepest vault, surrounded by scrolls so ancient the ink had begun to vanish. A few whispered it stepped only through dreams, choosing one sleeper each generation to bear a cryptic warning. Over centuries, historians concluded that the stag was metaphor and myth, a neat explanation for Corona's enviable stretches of good fortune. And perhaps they would have been right, had misfortune not begun to creep so steadily across the land that even skeptics found themselves repeating prayers once taught to reassure children. First came the drought, the worst in 300 years. As if the sky had forgotten how to unbutton its cloud coats. Then blight streaked the grain fields black. Soon caravans from the east arrived, late or not at all. The travelling musicians cancelled their circuits. Sailors on the coastal edges reported currents twisting unnaturally, lifting boats as though fingers drummed beneath the sea. Finally, just when the court astrologer announced a long eclipse would darken the solstice, the royal treasury discovered half its vaults empty, the lock plates unsullied but the coins gone as if they had taken wing. Commoners began murmuring about curses, nobles muttered about treason, and in the throne room itself, Queen Nerissa rubbed her temples, feeling invisible splinters of porcelain in every joint of her weary kingdom. Among the queen's attendants was a ledger-keeper named Rallan Mere Quiet, lanky, with ink stains permanently rooted beneath his nails. He was neither knight nor sorcerer. His sole weapons were a keen memory for detail and a devotion to truth that bordered on mania. One dusk, while cataloguing reparations for sun-scorched farmers, he discovered an oddity. Every 7th entry in the royal archives had been amended, sometimes centuries after the original quill strokes. The clerks responsible, long dead or retired, left no justification. Curious, he traced the pattern further back and noticed the revisions began appearing shortly after each recorded outburst of national crisis, famines, plagues, rebellions, events that history later described as brief turbulence swiftly reversed. Rallan's gaze drifted to an illuminated capital B in a vellum ledger dated 100 years prior. Tucked under the initial swirl was a miniature depiction of the porcelain stag. The painter had captured unbelievable tenderness in its stance. But one thing jarred Rallan. One of the stag's antlers was visibly chipped. The text beside the illustration originally describing barn repairs, had been scratched away and overwritten with a single line: "The floor grows. Bind the vein with dawn." The next morning, without authorization, Rowland descended to the palace library's sealed annex, a chamber whose air smelled of driftwood and ancient lamplight. In glass cases, he located 4 more ledgers bearing hidden stag illustrations. Each showed progressive damage. The chip became a crack. The crack became a missing segment. The missing segment gaped like the mouth of a cave. The rewrite beside the final image, penned only 30 years earlier, held a chilling statement. "One antler remains whole. If it breaks, the kingdom's luck shall bleed irretrievably." Ralchem emerged from the annex white-faced. He had never much believed the old legend, but parchment did not lie, at least not of its own accord. If the illustrations depicted a real artifact, then somewhere a porcelain stag, once pristine, was now perilously close to ruin. When he requested an audience with Queen Nerissa, the Chamberlain laughed. Her Majesty meets with ambassadors, not quill counters, but luck, fragile though it was, favoured him. That evening the Queen herself wandered the gardens, seeking solitude, and overheard Rachen practising his plea under a lilac arbour. Intrigued by his sincere panic, she granted 5 minutes. He needed only 2 to lay out what he had discovered. "Assume you're correct," she said. "Where is this relic? The court has excavated half the realm, searching for water, and found only dust." Ralrin could only shake his head. The ledgers give hints: river rock, coal light, and the hour between heartbeats. Metaphors, not maps. But I believe someone has recorded each fresh crack. Someone still alive. Thus, Queen Nerissa decreed a discreet investigation. She dispatched Rowland with a small retinue. Captain Asta Vale, famed for tracking bandits by starlight; Sister Malene, an archivist from the Silent Cloister, renowned for deciphering metaphors; and an apprentice glasswright, Ikra Lys, whose nimble hands mended everything from cathedral windows to frost-fractured goblets. "If the kingdom's luck is truly as fragile as porcelain," the Queen told them, "you 4 will be the cushions I place beneath it." Their search began at the riverside city of Theral, where fishing nets hung like silver drapes against the piers. In Theral's municipal annals, Sister Malene uncovered a marginal note written in wax pencil. "The stag passed the shallows tonight. Its song was hollow." Locals claimed a white shape once glided through the moonlit foam, but that the sighting ceased after the drought. No physical relic surfaced, but Rowland discovered something else: shards of porcelain embedded in the wooden beams of a collapsed warehouse. Captain Vale noted the impact marks looked deliberate, as though someone had attempted to smash a statue against the walls. Ikra examined the shards under a jeweller's loupe. They shone with an inner luminescence, unlike ordinary glaze. When she hummed softly, the pieces glimmered in rhythm, as if responding to sound. "Porcelain doesn't do that," she whispered. "This is not clay alone. Something living, some magic still clings to it." Clues guided them north to the coal town of Emberhusk, where the mines burrowed so deep the lower galleries steamed. There, a foreman revealed that 20 winters earlier, a masked man had bribed miners to hide a delicate idol in a ventilation hollow. The next night, an explosion collapsed the passage, killing 2 men and burying the idol beneath slag. The next night, an explosion collapsed the passage, killing 2 men and burying the idol beneath slag. The foreman had retrieved only 1 fragment, thinking to sell it later. He opened a tin box to show them. It was the tip of an antler, the glaze dulled, edges burnt. But when Ikra pressed the shard against its cousins from Theral, they fused seamlessly. The crack between them sealed itself with pale radiance, leaving no seam. A jolt of hope threaded through the group. It was proof, not mere rumour, but it also confirmed a grim reality. Someone had been dismantling the stag piece by piece, across decades, perhaps centuries. Each fracture might explain one spasm of misfortune in Corona's history, and now, with disasters lying like beads on a wire, the final break could be imminent. Sister Malen re-examined the mysterious margins in the ledgers. "Bind the vein with dawn," she recited. "What if that isn't poetry? Vein could mean fault line. Dawn could mean light." She frowned. "Glasswright, tell me, when do porcelain fractures glow?" "In kilns," Ikra answered, "when heat passes through to heal the body." "That's impossible outside a furnace," Captain Vale argued. "Unless," Rowland said slowly, "the relic itself is the furnace." Letters with new leads followed. In the hillside monastery of Farsong, the abbot preserved a reliquary containing yet another shard, traded from a dying pilgrim. In every case, the shards responded to one another, eager to rejoin. The company soon carried a satchel bright as starlight from within, but they still lacked the torso, the head, and most critical, any unbroken antler of light. Queen Nerissa's folly, the court began to whisper, wasting coin on a legend while fields charred. The Queen, however, sustained them, sending coded messages in which her script darkened with each passing week. Storms prowled the horizon, disease browned the leaves before autumn. Even the palace mosaic depicting Karen the river goddess cracked down its center. Time was collapsing like a mined tunnel. At last, using hints gleaned from cross-referenced scribbles, Sister Malen identified the earliest surviving marginalia regarding the stag. It described a silent vault beneath the very seat where frost kisses lamps unlit and bloodline keeps cage over luck. The very seat was the ancestral castle at Rosebarrow, long abandoned after the court moved to Orist. Historians claimed the foundations were riddled with unstable catacombs. No one had stepped inside for 3 generations. The Queen granted full rights to enter, though rumours said the hallways groaned as if reluctant to remember footsteps. Ralhan's group crossed weed-choked courtyards, lanterns bobbing amid statues severed by vines. They located a circular door in the Lord's crypt, its lock not rusted but melted, as though touched by lightning. Beyond, stairs spiraled downward into chill so raw breath turned to flakes. Their lanterns dimmed the deeper they went, until light seemed to retreat from the world. At the bottom lay a chamber vast and hollow like a bell. A single object hovered above a marble pedestal, the porcelain stag. Torso intact, but one antler shattered, the other still curved upward like a crescent of dawn. And yet the artifact was incomplete. Fractures spoked across its flank, ready to radiate wider. Standing before it was a lone figure in slate-grey robes, eyes sunken as wet pits after rain. He turned, unstartled, and bowed. "I wondered how long before you gathered the crumbs," he said. "Welcome, custodians of dying fortune." Captain Vale raised her sword. "Name yourself." "Once I was Lorcan of the House Sorel, historians to the crown," he said, voice soft. "Now I am simply the binder." Rowland's mind flickered. House Sorel had vanished 50 years ago after a scandal involving falsified ledgers. You altered the records. "I preserved them," Lorcan corrected. Each crisis demanded acknowledgement. "My family recorded every new fracture lest the Queen grow complacent." "You destroyed the stag," Ikra accused. Lorcan shook his head. "I fed it truth." He touched the intact antler. Prisms danced over his palm. "Luck is not charity, Clark. It is balance. The kingdom has lived on borrowed grace for centuries, prosperity unearned. Meanwhile, our neighbours tilt under wars and plagues. Think of Endris, Verdun. Half an hour. They bleed, so Corona may feast. I decided the cycle must break. Crack by crack, I returned us to neutrality. One more strike," he lifted a stone mallet from the shadows, "frees us from gilded chains." His pupils glinted with fervour. Rowland realised he faced a zealot, convinced of his righteousness. Captain Vale blocked his approach. Sister Malen began a low chant, weaving protective rune signs. Ikra clutched the bag of shards, which pulsed urgently, as though yearning to fly toward the stag and mend it. Rowland stepped between sword and mallet. Lorcan, the balance you seek will not be found in wreckage. Luck is not finite treasure to be hoarded or smashed. It is a bridge we hold in trust, to keep whole for the next traveler. You forget that misfortune also spills outward. If Corona falls, refugees will surge into Endris, Verdun, and Hafanar. Your act may damn them further. For a heartbeat, Lorcan hesitated. Then despair hardened across his brow. Fear rationalizes cowardice. He swung. Captain Vale parried, steel on stone. Sparks flew, but Lorcan dodged gracefully, driven by obsession, not skill. Relhin and Ikra circled, searching for a way to restore the shards without becoming casualties. Sister Malign's chant rose. Invisible sigils stitched themselves through the air, tethering fragments of light to her voice. The stag chimed a bell of porcelain struck by intangible wind. Hairline cracks widened, webbing across its belly. Lorcan smiled, seeing imminent victory. He knocked Val aside and lifted his mallet overhead for the decisive blow at the remaining antler. Ikra hurled herself forward, clutching 2 shards. They fused mid-air, forming a blade of porcelain fire that intercepted the mallet. The stone shattered. Shock rippled through Lorcan. Pain split his knuckles. Vale recovered, but held her sword against his throat instead of killing him. Rowland took the satchel. "Bind the vein with dawn," he whispered. He remembered Ikra's earlier words. The stag itself could be the furnace. He scattered shards across the floor around the pedestal. Sister Malden redirected her chant. Light flared from the stag's core, pulling the fragments inward. Each flew like comets, locking into fractures, knitting glaze, forging anew. Brightness prickled their skin, both searing and cool. In the glow, Lorcan stared, transfixed by the symmetry he had long ago vowed to end. With a crystalline sigh, the stag became whole. Twin antlers of light arced skyward, shedding sparks that drifted like lazy embers before fading. The chamber's stale air tasted suddenly crisp, as though snowmelt now coursed through unseen ducts. The group felt tension dissolve from their muscles. Even Lorcan's face slackened, grief overwhelming fanaticism. The stag bent its porcelain neck toward Ralhan No. Not toward, but through, for its muzzle passed into his chest like dawn sunlight through curtain gaps. Images burst behind his eyelids. Rivers refilled, coins greened, coins reappeared in coffers, children barefoot upon meadows of clover. Yet there were warnings, too. Visions of complacency breeding new fractures, of greed carving fissures down the antlers once more. Stewardship, the vision whispered, never ends. Then it spoke, not in words, but in the heartbeat space between breaths, a music older than echo, and Raylan understood. Luck was not a blessing delivered, it was a covenant negotiated daily by every soul in the realm. When the stag drew back, one branch of its radiant antlers flickered. From the tip drifted a single petal of light, settling into Rallan's open palm. It hardened into a brooch, resembling a tiny porcelain leaf. He understood the duty. The kingdom would now need a new custodian of its fragile luck. Lorcan fell to his knees. Tears trickled down his face, carving clean paths through grime. "I wanted fairness," he whispered, "and achieved only fracture." Sister Malen answered gently. She bound his hands, but treated him like a sick man, not a monster. For the first time in decades, he looked relieved to surrender his burden. They ascended from the vault. In the courtyard, dawn poised on the horizon, rose and gold. Clouds gathered, dark but generous, promising rain that nurtures rather than floods. Captain Vale tilted her head, listening. She swore she could hear rivers laughing. By the time they reached Orist, rumors raced faster than courier doves. Wells overflowed, trade ships docked early, and the eclipse predicted by the astrologer had shifted, allowing sunlight to crown the solstice after all. In the throne room, Queen Nerissa felt pressure lift from her sternum as if the roof itself had grown wings. When she greeted Rauhen, she noticed the brooch at his collar. "I sent you a ledger keeper," she said softly. "You bring me a guardian." Rauhen knelt. "Not a guardian alone, Your Majesty, merely the first voice in a long choir of vigilance." The Queen nodded. "Then we shall compose the rest of the choir together." She decreed that the stag remain in the vault beneath Rosebarrow, accessible only by a council representing every province, trade, and faith, a living oath that Luck's stewardship belonged to all. Once a year, the council would descend to ensure each tile, each gleam remained intact. And once a year, every citizen would be invited to petition not for personal fortune, but for wisdom enough to balance fortune's scales. As for Lorcan, he was neither executed nor exiled. Instead, the Queen appointed him scribe to the council so that his compulsion to record might serve preservation rather than sabotage. Many argued leniency jeopardized security, but Rallan reminded them cracks begin in hidden corners. Transparency is the best glue. Time flowed. Rain fell, seeds sprouted, coins clinked anew through the markets of Orest. Yet the tale of the Porcelain Stag remained etched in communal memory, not as bedtime charm, but as solemn charge. Children visiting the Western Gate Shrine learned that the shard once dwelling there had returned home, and they placed sprigs of thyme in the niche as promise they would watch for the next hairline fissure in their world. On certain nights, if one stood by the riverbank during the breath between moonset and sunrise, a shape like a stag fashioned from gentle lamps would appear, hooves kissing water without ripples, antlers scattering dawn, ahead of schedule. It lingered only an instant, but long enough to remind those awake that luck, however fragile, can be luminous, so long as the hands that carry it remember light is meant for sharing. And though the kingdom could never again afford the oblivious comfort of thinking itself invulnerable, it discovered a rarer treasure in vigilant unity. For the greatest miracle the Porcelain Stag provided was not endless prosperity, but the lesson that a realm's true fortune resides not upon antlers of light, but within the hearts willing to keep those antlers whole.